Coming up on this week's call,
I'm happy to see that in that space, that blue ocean space in the Philippines, the holy grail is really the untapped middle class client. And in that space, nobody's really made much progress in the last few years because it's tough. It's tough to create your own credit evaluation system, to train your credit model to the point of unit profitability. Because when you launch, you iterate the processes very fast and a lot. And it makes no sense to automate the first iteration of it, because then you just have pre-automated and they're just wasted with it. So for a couple of years, with relatively low level of automation, but at the end of last year, we started investing in getting that automation in place and really trying to improve the efficiency of the humans that we got. As I mentioned, contact center, for example, we just took 50%, we just doubled the efficiency of our contact center agents last month, just with a generative AI implementation. I'd say, depending on which market you want to operate in, that's a very different way to monetize the things. So we're monetizing it through the credit card. And we think it's very exciting and very emotionally fulfilling, because at the end of the day, we're helping Filipinos truly improve their lifestyle, right? Bringing credit to the masses. I'm a big believer in that. The early stages of my life, when I was a refugee in the US, that really helped me when I got my first credit loan from the credit union. So it's been with me throughout my career.
hi folks, welcome back to On Call with Insignia, where you go on call with leaders innovating the future of Southeast Asia, or as we like to call it, Asia Innovation. I'm your host, Paolo Aquino. And our call with Tonik CEO and founder Greg Krasnov continues in this episode. Catch last week's episode for part 1 and make sure you get notified on when to dial in by following us wherever you're listening to us. I wanted to get your sense of how fintech more broadly, even beyond digital banking, your view of how that has evolved in the Philippines, Southeast Asia, any specific trends that you're particularly interested in fintech this year or moving forward.
I think it's been very interesting to see how the change in the macro and changing the funding environment is changing the playing field. We've had a lot of people doing a lot of pretty silly things when the money was flowing easily. And if I did what the market was back then telling me to do, then I probably would be a banker by now. Back then, the market was valuing neobanks as that price to user. And I'm a bit of an old school guy, right? So I believe that a bank should be profitable and the bank should be selling profitable products as a starting point. You don't scale it out until you achieve that. So it has its sequencing, right? And that whole kind of, hey, let's go and just capture this huge market share mentality, that is not a safe place to grow a bank. For me, it's return to normal in a way. And okay, I feel bad for some of the founders that kind of get caught in this. We were very fortunate that we raised a very large Series B right at the kind of end of that peak wave. So we raised 130 million, closed that in the past February last year. And with our burn, we're very comfortable that we have plenty of money for the next year, 2 years, 2 years to support our burn. We're not under pressure to raise, basically. A lot of people have burned through the money that they raised on the peak, and that's now creating some shaking out. There are some guys that, in the ecosystem that I can see that have been focused on the right things, focused on that fundamental profitability, that are doing well. There are some others who are under huge stress because they can't raise and they were very reliant on raising. They didn't have that capacity to profitability. So it's interesting to watch that. It's not the first time I've seen it. I'm old enough to actually have been there during the internet bubble. I was an associate at Bank of America Private Equity in London back in late 90s, right? I was actually allocated to the internet market to look for like internet deals, right? And back then it was like price per eyeball, right? Or whatever. Some like very interesting metrics. Yeah. So to me, that was actually a huge lesson even back then. That, okay, this stuff moves in waves. And this irrational exuberance sometimes gets the better of people, and you just got to keep a level head through it. And remember that business is there for profit, not for massive market share capture as a main assumption. That'll come. But it'll come as a result of diligent focus on the profitability.
Yeah, really great pointing that out, a way to balance out. And I guess old school is new school, quote unquote, nowadays. I wanted to tie in what you've just talked about to what you mentioned in our very first podcast back in 2020, when you talked about your thesis on digital banking, how you wanted to do things differently from what a lot of other fintechs have been trying to do in terms of the way they approach lending and even how you approach lending yourself prior to doing Tonik, right? So from your view now, like how does Tonik's current trajectory come full circle to that thesis that you shared with us in 2020?
I'm happy to see that in that space, that blue ocean space in the Philippines, the holy grail is really the untapped middle class client. And in that space, nobody's really made much progress in the last few years because it's tough. It's tough to create your own credit evaluation system, to train your credit model to the point of unit profitability. Our team has a lot of experience in doing this stuff in many different parts of the world. We have a bunch of quite senior guys who they're not 25, 30-year fintechers, right? They're experienced bankers, data science people, etc. And still for us, it's been taking longer than we expected. I think that's a non-trivial challenge, but there's definitely gold at the end of the rainbow that it's an enormous market. And whoever gets there first will have the benefit of kind of onboarding these clients faster, and therefore being able to upsell them into subsequent products becomes much easier. And the stickiness of that process is actually quite good. So the bank that I built previously, Platinum Bank, great. We had, by the time we're done with our builds and we're exiting, we had more than half of our loan book provided by repeat clients or on a revolving product. And those guys were super profitable. Because the credit risk is already low on them because you know them well and they're good guys. The acquisition cost, you've already amortized into the first product. So you don't have the CAC. So basically the unit profitability is great. And that's what made that bank like really profitable. We're the most profitable bank in the country at the time that we were exiting. So I think that's, to me, is okay. The lessons learned are, yes, there's definitely that massive gold to be had. It's taken us longer than we expected to figure it out, but we're getting there. And I think we're still in a great position. So our competition hasn't really figured it out. The guys, there's a few digital banks out there that have been announcing and yelling on every street corner right now that we're the biggest, we're the best, et cetera, et cetera. None of these guys have figured out the holy grail, which is the kind of the unsecured and the semi-secured digital channel only lending. Yeah, none of them have done that. We've been trying to figure it out for much longer than them, so we're probably in a better place than there.
What really excites me is how what you guys are doing will really set the standard for other banks in terms of how they approach building out their own credit bureau and really assessing who to lend to and what makes a good borrower. Right? So that's super exciting to see develop in the next few years. I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about how Tonik is very much an international organization, although it's very much focused on that rainbow in the Philippines, sticking to its guns in the Philippines, but you guys employ people from India, from Singapore, and I wanted to know what your approach has been to managing this kind of international organization and aligning everybody in terms of the priorities, like for example with the loan business that you guys are scaling right now.
Our main two hubs are, Manila. So we have in Manila, obviously, we have our regulated bank entity. And here we have the biggest headcount, close to, I think, about 350 people. So our bank staff, all the kind of bank functions, the regulatory related functions, and then a lot of ops staff. So we just launched what we call our ops engine. It's basically a big open space type of environment where we have our underwriters, our collectors, our call center agents, and all the other ops functions that work directly on the client volume. And then in Chennai, we have our R&D, our main R&D hub, where we have about 100 people headcount. And that's where we do our tech. Basically, it's very difficult to find in the Philippines sufficient quality and sufficient depth of the pool of people who've done digital banking. And a lot of that for the world has been done out of India. So that's why we decided to go there. And we have a great team there that is really focused on not just IT development, but it's also all of our kind of day-to-day BAU business as usual stuff. Just running our infrastructure, running all of the testing ops and all the data science stuff, etc. So those are the two main hubs. We also have a small hub in Singapore, which is where we headquartered. And mainly in that hub, we have about 20 people that are mainly focused on technology and some of the more advanced technology stuff and product stuff we're doing out of Singapore. Frankly, I haven't been to our Singapore office in over 6 months. I'm mainly going between Singapore, Chennai, and Manila, and most of my time I try to spend in Manila because that's where we have the team. Those are the three main hubs. We do have some people outside of these, but as COVID ended, we've actually tried to pull everybody into these three main hubs. So we still have a couple of people here and there outside, but we find that you can't do innovation in the same way without face-to-face. That's why we've been very focused on bringing people together. And Some of our senior guys, for example, that have gas spread all over. A few of them have already moved to Manila. A few of them are in the process of moving.
Yeah, definitely night and day from when we last talked. Where I think you just visited Manila for the first time back then, and then now you're literally spending most of your time in Manila. So that's great to hear. How do you see Tonik's organization, maybe from a functions perspective, given everything that we've talked about thus far with loans, AI, all of that? How do you see the organization developing over the next year?
What we're doing right now is investing quite heavily in operational efficiency. That ops engine that I mentioned, we started out with pretty high headcount there because most of our processes were not automated. And that was by design. We didn't want to invest in automation of the processes until the processes were more stable. Because when you launch, you iterate the processes very fast and a lot. And it makes no sense to automate the first iteration of it because then you just have to re-automate and they're just wasted in that. So for a couple of years with relatively low level of automation, but at the end of last year, we started investing in getting that automation in place and really trying to improve the efficiency of the humans that we got so that as we scale out, we basically can maintain our headcount pretty flat. So that's our plan. We think that in the central functions, we're not going to grow them very much as we scale now. We see opportunities to keep investing and keep bringing those efficiencies on. As I mentioned, contact center, for example, we just took 50%. We just doubled the efficiency of our contact center
Right, right.
agents the last month, just through the generative AI implementation. So that's a perfect example of some of the other stuff we're doing in this area. We will grow headcount in the field though, because we have the promoter network for our sales finance product, the retailer partnerships, where we put our promoter in the retail store. That they can hold the customer by hand, explain to them how to onboard, help them with the product, etc. So that network will grow. It's not within our Tonik Digital Bank. It's actually we have a separate company in the Philippines that does that.
Mm,
But on a consolidated basis, that's where we'll probably see most of the headcount growth. The retailer partner still wants to see us doing that kind of an interaction with the customer in order to enable a smoother onboarding and a higher penetration. At the end of the day, they want to sell a TV. So, or fridge or whatever it is.
right.
And so what they want to see is that we have a high conversion. And the high conversion is still a high touch business at the point of sale.
You're really balancing out that automation versus the trust that comes with building this kind of business. I wanted to tie a bow on this conversation so far with a quick question on if you were to give a class on monetization for digital banks, what would be a key one line takeaway that you would have for the students of this class?
There's two types of environments in which digital banks operate.
Mm,
It's a higher income environment and a lower income environment. And there are two different models for monetization. So guys like that operate in the developed markets, Chime, Revolut, etc. Those guys are more focused on transactional monetization. The reason being that, okay, you get a customer to onboard who may be making $5,000 a month, that you give him a debit card and he will use a debit card. If you can get him to transfer the salary to you, he'll use a debit card. And every time he uses a debit card, you make 2% back of interchanging. So that's great income stream. But it doesn't work in a market like Philippines. In a market like Philippines, A, people don't make $5,000 a month. They make a lot less. B, they're not used to using their debit cards to pay for everything. Usually the people in the middle class, they get their salary card, income dumped into the account. They go to the ATM, withdraw the cash. It's pretty hard to monetize on the basis of the payments. But at the same time, there's usually in these emerging lower income markets, there's a much, much higher credit under penetration, credit inclusion issue. Because Philippines is not unique. Big banks in the Philippines don't really care about that middle class consumer or lending to that middle class. They're making enough money off of their corporate business and off of the premium retail business. And so going into that market is not a priority. And it's hard work. Building all those credit models, optimizing your CAC, optimizing your cost of risk, optimizing your cost of operations, building a real kind of McDonald's type of an operation. That's hard. And that requires a lot of the know-how that the big banks don't. So that's really the model we're deploying. And I'd say, depending on which market you want to operate in, that's a very different way to monetize the business. So we're monetizing it through the credit path. And we think it's very exciting and very emotionally fulfilling because at the end of the day,
mm,
we're helping Filipinos truly improve their lifestyle, right?
Mhm.
bringing credit to the masses. I'm a big believer in that. The early stages of my life when I was a refugee in the US, that really helped me when I got my first credit loan from the credit union. So it's been with me throughout my career.
You really talked about how that this whole work, all this work that you're doing is really like emotionally impactful as well and emotionally meaningful as well for you guys. Like any particular story or something that you've heard from people on the ground in terms of what Tonik has been able to do in terms of changing lives or impacting lives of its customers?
There's every once in a while you get something like that. Yeah, I got actually like 2, 3 months ago, I got this ping from one of our customers, and she like literally just contacted me on the Facebook out of the blue and said, thank you so much for letting me take the loan and walk me through the life story situation that had helped her to turn things around. And man, that just made my day. And then I shared that with the rest of the team. I shared with the whole company. And the number of hearts that I got on that on our company chat was like record. Right. So I could see that story really resonated. And this kind of stuff you get every once in a while really makes it all worth it.
Yeah, definitely puts everything that you guys do into perspective. And on that note, I wanted to go into a rapid fire round. Greg is no stranger to this, so I changed the questions up, do things a little bit differently this time around. So short, sweet answers will do. What superpower of any one of your fellow C-level colleagues would you want to have?
Tough one. CFO, Todd, was on execution, just getting things done.
Mhm.
And we've been together for 20 years now. And we've done a few things together and we're very complementary because I'm usually the guy with a lot of vision there and that I can drill down into numbers and analysis really well, etc. But when it comes to just getting it done, well, that's a superpower that I don't have the staying power in doing that. And therefore, I try to bring people around me that are really good at that.
Mhm.
So, and I find that quite good and compliment.
Right, right. Great CEO, CFO dynamic there. If you were to be invited to produce a Netflix series, what would be the title and maybe like a one-liner for the show?
Title and one liner. There is this. I saw on Netflix. There's actually a motorcycling series by one of the famous actors. I forget the guy's name. So he cycled through.
Is this Ewan McGregor or
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It was so I probably want to replicate that. Have a little down with a camera, and I just go out and do that.
right. Yeah, sounds I mean if you do that in the Philippines, that would definitely be interesting to watch. Looking back now, what is a skill, could be a soft skill or hard skill that you believe you should have learned back in your time as a student?
Not just as a student, but I think first 10 years of my career was private equity. And my studies were quite analytical, focused finance, accounting, and some political science, but very technical. And then private equity was also like very technical, a lot of like strategic analysis, financial modeling, etc. Now, when I got out and became an entrepreneur, so I was an entrepreneur in my college days, but that was just like a sole proprietorship. But then when I started building my first business, I was like in my early 30s, I was like, man, all of that stuff, Excel and PowerPoint will take anything. And none of that matters. What matters is can you get stuff done by working with people and getting teams together, getting people motivated, getting people focused. And it's those people skills, the soft skills that have been a real kind of watch out for me throughout my career and a big blind spot in my early days. Because when you're in private equity, nobody cares about it. They just care about working 24 hours a day, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think universities should teach more of those soft skills, managerial leadership skills, etc. Then I'm a YPOR, so I went to a seminar YPO organized in Stanford for a week, a leadership seminar. When I was just at the beginning of my journey as an entrepreneur, that really blew my brain up. And finally, somebody explained to me what leadership meant. Hey, so yeah, sorry,
Right.
long answer, but yeah.
No worries. Yeah, that's really one of the most elusive questions of life. What is leadership really, and how do you get things done at that level? And in contrast to soft skills, like if there's something that you could automate in your job just by wishing for it, what aspect of your role would that be?
Oh man, travel. Because I end up wasting a lot of time on airports and planes. And I wish I had the like Star Trek transporter, beam me up Scotty thing that could just get me from my house in Singapore to my office in Manila like this, right? That would just be awesome. I hate wasting the time.
Yeah, sounds good, and definitely something that we got a lot of answers that I guess already exist with LLMs and Gen AI, but that one does. I don't know how that's gonna be possible yet with current technology. Definitely a good answer. If you could pick anyone alive or dead to be your 24/7 executive coach, who would it be, and what would you want to learn in particular?
I do have actually an executive coach right now. He's an amazing guy. He's been working with founders, kind of Series A, Series B, Series C founders.
Yeah, anything in
So
particular that you picked up from your relationship with him?
yeah, I think some of the what I've been struggling with on my own is that you develop habits through consistency of behavior, and that so much of our behavior, including things we want to aspire to be or things we want to gain, whether it be exercise or diet or whatever, right? It's all down to habits, but you can build those habits and working on mindfulness and working on consistency. Like that's really probably where he's helped me a lot. I'm very grateful for.
And speaking of habits, to wrap up our rapid fire round, any one of these habits that you'd like to recommend to our audience that have really helped you?
For me, as I get older, actually wellness becomes a lot more important because my business runs on my energy at the end of the day. So if my chi is not flowing properly, the business is not going to flow because I'm not going to radiate the right kind of energy field that I then try to control everybody into. So taking care of my energy and of how I flow has been one of my big lessons learned over the last few years. And it's a continuous struggle because I'm really not good at taking care of myself. But
Any particular action that you started doing more recently, or anything that you changed
um,
about your lifestyle?
I have my like 16-point checklist doing daily or trying to check over. I got an app called Solidify where I'm pretty religious about checking it off. It has to do with diet, it has to do with toxins, drinking, smoking, and that kind of stuff. Things I eat, the exercise, being in contact with my close ones, and a couple of other things.
And on that note, thank you so much, Greg, for sharing a little bit of your chi with us on this podcast and spending some time really talking about how Tonik has evolved its business over the past year, really scaling up its loan portfolio, its loan book, and really starting to get on those gears of unit profitability with some of its loan products as well. So really exciting news, and looking forward to more of these milestones along the way. Really excited that you brought up AI as well, and what are the implications for Tonik with regards to that. So excited for that too. And yeah, looking forward to having you back on again with even greater news down the line.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on this call. Make sure you get notified on when to dial in by following us wherever you're listening to us. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, toss in a like, and let us know if you'd like to hear more of this topic in the comments. See you all in our next call.